patriotism, faith, national unity, education, fiscal responsibility, civility, the values that define America. Fascinating stories and talks from America-loving patriots dedicated to preserving freedom, opportunity, and justice. Welcome to the Friends and Fellow Citizens podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 48 of Friends and Fellow Citizens. I'm your host, Sherman Tylowski. Thank you so much for joining us this week. If you haven't already, please make sure you subscribe to the show so that you don't miss a single episode. We've got a lot of great content out there. I do want to mention that we have made our debut of our brand new series, the Sacred Honor series, which debuted in the previous episode, episode 47, with our first episode about John Hancock. We will be covering all 56 signers in the order in which they signed the Declaration of Independence, and in each episode we will be learning about how each signer's career and life could teach us something about how we can act in our representative democracy. I hope you will tune in to that series as well. It's once every 4 weeks, so make sure, again, you hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss a single episode. I am very, very excited to welcome our special guest today. Her name is Heather Lee O'Keefe. She is a 24-year-old lawyer, entrepreneur, television host, Miss Florida USA delegate, and volunteer for multiple charities. She recently just graduated from Nova Southeastern University, Shepherd Broad College of Law, and she was one of the youngest students in that class. And she is a proud alumna of West Virginia University. And she also is very, very committed to combine her Juris Doctor degree from NSU, along with her journalism and political science background, and work as a full-time attorney and obtain a part-time role as a legal commentator for a major news network. Among her many highlights, I found this one particularly interesting. The city of Fort Lauderdale recognized Heather's dedication and commitment to her community with an official city proclamation that proclaims January 7th as Heather Lee O'Keefe Day. She is definitely someone with a lot of accomplishments, and I am so excited to have her on Friends and Fellow Citizens. Heather, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely, Sherman. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, as everyone can tell, you have a really, really impressive background. If we only focused on your background, it would take the entire episode. I just basically scratched the surface. You really have done a lot and are looking forward to so much more in your career. I want to start by asking you how you got interested in this field of law and how you decided to continue pursuing it.
Absolutely. So, it's funny you say that because yesterday was actually the 20-year anniversary of Legally Blonde. And I have to say that movie was, very a foundation for my interest. The legal profession, as cliche as that might sound, I really loved that movie as a little girl, and I really just looked up to Elle Woods or Reese Witherspoon and saw that, women don't have to fill this stereotypical role that, women have these types of jobs and men have these types of jobs. So I really, just wanted to be a lawyer and break those stereotypes and, be legally blonde.
I was going to say, you sent me your website name at blondebarrister.com, which I'll link it in the show notes below. I was like, that sounds like a really great spin-off from this movie. So, so you kind of took my thunder a little bit, if that's okay. Fantastic. So, you got interested, Elle Woods being, I guess, a bit of a mentor for you, or I guess specifically Reese Witherspoon in this case. How did you decide to now combine law, but also journalism and political science? This kind of seems like an interesting mix. So why did you decide to pick these three subjects as kind of a bit of a combination in your education?
Sure. So I knew I always wanted to go to law school. That was the end goal. So going into that, going into college and high school, I was researching what the best majors were in college for law students. So I found that journalism was an interesting one because you do a lot of writing, a lot of creative writing, and also a lot of reading and researching. So that's kind of what you do in law school too. So that's how I got the journalism. And then political science, I think, speaks for itself. That alone just kind of helps with, understanding the legal system, understanding government and how it works, and all of that. So I like to say that I obtained my bachelor's degree in journalism to give a voice to the silenced, and then I pursued my Juris Doctor to be an advocate for justice.
Yeah, I've always found law very interesting in America because we have a unique system, having a constitution in a federal republic. What is it about law that really makes you want to continue learning about it and applying that in your career and life?
Oh my goodness. I just find law so fascinating. And what I love about, America specifically is that if you don't like a law, or if you don't agree with it, that's what's so great about our system is you can work your way up the system to change that law. So I would have to say that is what I find the most interesting and intriguing about our government and our legal system in America.
I want to now turn to the journalism part and how that kind of relates to the two subjects, particularly with political science. We often hear about journalistic integrity and the standards that we expect journalists to meet in this world of 24/7 media. Now, I don't know the specifics of the journalism which you were involved in college, but I wanted to ask you how journalism kind of played a role in understanding political science, even as political topics can be so touchy. And the fact that you had to not only meet journalistic standards, but also understand how important it is to maintain that fine line between journalism and one's own political views.
Absolutely. So those are, like you mentioned, the key aspects of journalism is remaining that integrity and staying as unbiased as possible, which can be tough, of course, depending on what network you're working with. There are some obvious biases with certain networks, and you have to, if you're working for them, stick with those sides. So I think it's important to educate people to not only use one news resource and to be aware of those biases. As journalists, you're supposed to be the fact finder and just share the facts without any opinion. So kind of like in law, the jury is the fact finder, the journalists are kind of the same way as what I like to kind of relate it back to. But yeah, like I said, just knowing that there are those implicit biases, being aware of those and finding your news from different resources to stay as well-rounded as possible.
Yes, absolutely. And kind of adding the political science to it, it kind of gets a little bit more interesting because not only just about opinion about, a sports team or something, you went to West Virginia University. So you're obviously going to be understandably biased if you're supporting your team, right? But when it gets into some really, really tricky issues, that's when I think it also gets very risky too. Again, we want to, in general, get along with people and hope that everyone else shares the same kind of worldviews. So, in your kind of experience in college and everything, when you spoke with your peers or perhaps your instructors about touchy political subjects, what sort of things did you have to kind of keep in mind, or some things that you found were particularly interesting when it came to this idea of being able to balance between journalist integrity and having your own political views on very, very touchy subjects?
I think you just have to be smart about it. And in college, they say you take the professor, not the class. So if you have a professor who, leans one way versus the other and you're writing your final essay, you of course don't want to write an essay that doesn't align with their political views. As terrible as that sounds, you just have to be smart about it and keep that in mind. You don't want to be arguing with your professor if you want to get an A. So that's terrible to say, but I think that's just the truth of the matter and the truth of life. You have to be aware of your audience.
Right. And think about like that long-term thing of, okay, if I get a good grade here, I can be able to do well. And eventually they're like bigger fights to win. Is that kind of
Battle.
gotcha.
Absolutely. choose your battles.
Gotcha. I think that's a really interesting answer. I agree absolutely, because I know that people want to have their own political beliefs and everything, but you gotta play along with it. You gotta know how people lean. Yeah, I've done one of those things where I've written a lot of stuff about free market and stuff when I kind of knew that my professor was a Marxist. So you can kind of tell how that worked out.
Right. I mean, there's time and place for everything. I think in your final paper for class is probably not the place to display all your political ideologies.
Telling me. I wanted to just ask you, kind of in your life and your career and personal experience, what sort of interesting stories and experiences have inspired you to continue pursuing this career that you've longed for so long?
Sure. So I grew up in a household with a single mother. My mom worked multiple jobs to provide for us, and I saw how hard that she had to work. And she always instilled in me that education is one thing that somebody can never take away from you. So that was really important to me. And ever since a young age, since I was a little girl in, kindergarten, I always took my education very seriously. And I kept that through my life, through middle school, high school, and even college. I graduated high school with a 4.6 GPA. I got a full ride scholarship to West Virginia University from my all academic. No athletic scholarships here. It was all academic. And it goes to show that hard work does pay off, and if you take your education seriously, it will really take you far in life. So that's my message. Is you can do well in life. Just take your education seriously. Even if you're pursuing a career in business or the arts or whatever it may be, take your education seriously, and that will take you far in life.
Absolutely. And I want to ask about the full ride scholarship thing, because I think it's so interesting how you kind of knew that college was going to be expensive at an early age, right? And you kind of it's kind of helpful to get some money before you attend college. So how important was it to know about the scholarships and know about how important it is to be fiscally responsible in the future, and know that there are times when you can find opportunities to pay off some of this education so that you don't have to worry about it later in the future?
Right. I mean, I think that students are not educated well enough on the topic of scholarships and seeking out scholarships early. Like I said, I knew from a very young age that I wanted to go to law school, and that would be expensive, and I may have a harder time finding a scholarship for law school versus college. So in high school, I really focused on getting good grades and getting a scholarship to undergrad, so that in the future, that would make finding scholarships for law school or paying for law school easier. And like I said, I grew up in a single parent household. My mom was an only parent, so I really didn't want to make it hard on her, and I wanted to make it as easy as possible on our family to pay for college as much as I could on my own, get scholarships as much as I could. So luckily, I graduated from West Virginia University with virtually no debt, and so going into law school, it was a huge burden lifted off my shoulders, knowing that I had 0 student loans, and I could, pursue that dream of law school without as much worry financially.
That's so wonderful, especially when you mentioned how you thought about your mom and thought about how you could take off some of that burden, because I think that's really, really quite something, and something in a way that I didn't think about before, perhaps, and maybe some others. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. I want to now get into some of the contemporary issues now. I mentioned earlier that political science makes a lot of things interesting, and no doubt that look, I mean, this show is obviously nonpartisan, so we're not kind of advocating one party or another, but we're also delving into some really, really interesting and very complex issues. And obviously, we're not going to have time to delve into every single little thing that happens in this world. But I wanted to invite you on also because we are seeing a lot of issues nowadays that involve this intersection of journalism, law, and politics. One of which is really about the news culture here, so to speak. It's kind of I know it sounds like a very broad term, and I'm not trying to portray every single journalist the same way, but we are in a world where there is 24/7 news. You can turn on the TV at 2 a.m. and watch still stuff about the previous day, and it's still kind of boggles my mind that that used to not be a thing back in several decades ago. So as you kind of see this 24/7 news cycle, and now kind of the social media, I guess we'll start with kind of TV as a start here. What do you kind of see as kind of the benefits and consequences of having a 24/7 news cycle in terms of how it affects political discourse and I guess the way, the general public kind of views the world and such?
I would say the benefits are, public awareness and education. I think that the 24/7 news access gives, more people access than they were able to have decades ago. Because like you said, you can just turn on the news anytime on TV, on your phone, wherever you may be, you can turn on something and get access to the news. So I think it's great that there's more public access and education. But the consequences, of course, are, stress that it may cause people. I know that I limit my intake of news and I really don't watch much TV, to be honest with you, because I feel like, you turn something on and it's more bad than good nowadays, unfortunately. And I feel like a lot is just trying to polarize our country and separate us, and different news channels are portraying things differently. So back to what I was saying earlier of getting your news source from multiple different sources and not just sticking to one to really get a full, unbiased, multifaceted opinion on today's current events. I mean, with TV, I guess it would be easy just flipping through the different channels, or on social media, following multiple different news outlets, or maybe a less polarized channel such as, Associated Press or something like that, that's a little more journalistic centered and more fact-based than opinion-based. So just following multiple different sources, alternating your channel that you watch on TV, just easy things like that. And most of all, being aware of the news source that you are internalizing. Say you turn on Fox knowing that that's a right-wing station, or turning on CNN and knowing that's a left-wing station, just knowing that they may be portraying an ideology that leans one way versus the other.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree, and I don't consider myself a journalist. I mean, I'm a podcaster, but journalists often report about other things and other people. I only report about myself and my guests, so I don't think I really fit with the journalist part, especially with regards to my solo episodes for understandable reasons. I want to now just real quick, I mean, this is a lot about not just technology changing, but also a money-making cycle. I mean, do you see any prospect of the 24/7 news cycle really ever changing, especially with regards to the money-making cycle that it runs on?
I mean, I honestly don't know if there is an answer to that, to be honest with you. Money keeps the lights on and it makes the world go round. So, I mean, it's, the advertising dollars that come into the station and the sponsorships and all of that, that's what keeps these businesses going. And that's kind of just the way it is, unfortunately. So I'm not really sure if there is a solid answer to that, as terrible as that sounds, but I think that's just the way the world is, unfortunately.
Yeah. I wish I had a better answer too. So we're on par here. Now, about kind of just in general with regards to social media. Now, I mentioned TV earlier, but social media is it's a very, very tricky world, because I am definitely someone who supports free speech and everything. But at the same time, there's a lot of stuff that let's just put it that way. It's not for kids, right? And a lot of stuff that has harmed a lot of people's livelihoods in one way or another. So what's your kind of the similar question I asked before about what some of the benefits and consequences of social media? What do you kind of see? How do you kind of see that playing out with regards to social media nowadays?
So nowadays, there are so many more young kids on social media, and the younger generation is all over it. And I think these kids are so impressionable, and they don't really understand that all this information they are just absorbing without even possibly realizing it. So let's say their favorite celebrity or their favorite influencer or whoever it may be is pushing this social justice ideology or whatever it may be, their politics on their following, which may be the younger generation, young kids, and they don't understand that they are being impacted by their favorite influencer or celebrity, whoever it may be. They don't really understand fully, most of the time, I don't think, what they are. They don't understand that they are having an idea pushed on them, is what I'm trying to say. And they may be advocating for something that they have no idea what it means, just because their favorite celebrity says, oh, this is cool, so I want to do this too. So I think that social media has really been a good and bad thing, in the sense that people are able to, live out their free speech rights and that sort of thing. But I think it could be harmful for kids in a way, but also positive, because I think the younger generation is now more politically involved than ever. I just pray that they know what they're getting themselves into and are educating themselves properly, and not just listening to their favorite influencer or celebrity or whoever it may be.
As I mentioned before, I am a big proponent of free speech and civil discourse, but that's not happening as much as I would want to see it, and
Right.
a lot of people would probably agree, in part because there's certain people whose views are being censored. And I know that there is very much a fine line between speech that isn't free speech, essentially, and just people who have different views. So what do you think are the effects of censorship, shadow banning, and other tactics that we're seeing from social media companies to try and, quote unquote, tamper down the rhetoric that's happening on social media platforms?
I think it's a very interesting topic, and it's uncharted territory. Do we have free speech rights on social media? Is it a public domain? Is it private? I think that's a really interesting territory that I'm excited to follow and see where that goes, and see if new laws become enacted surrounding that. So I think it's a really interesting topic. And I obviously believe that people should have their right to free speech, but that only goes so far. You don't have a right to say hateful things, hate speech and that sort of thing. You don't have a right to make threats over the internet, or, violently disagree with someone. I think there's a time and place for everything, and peacefully, expressing your beliefs and just having a open discussion with people. I think that's one great thing about social media, is that we are able to have that discussion with people. And if we can do that in a nonviolent way, in a peaceful way over social media, I think that the world will be a much better place.
You got that right. I know that there are plenty of proposals out there of how to manage free speech. We've had a number of conversations about that. It just goes to show how important the subject is. I love to explore this further, especially in regards to the Brandenburg test, which is a way to essentially measure how far free speech can go. This is based on a Supreme Court case, Brandenburg v. Ohio, back in the 60s. But that will be a topic for another time. I just want to mention that real quick. I mean, don't get me wrong. Social media allows you to connect with people you never thought you would connect with before.
Right.
Us two conversing is a classic example, obviously. How important is it to complement the social media experience with the in-person experience and relationships that we have with others?
Sure. So I think, and over the last year with COVID and everything going virtual, I think it has obviously had its pros and cons, but one of the main benefits, I would say, is being able to connect with people that we wouldn't have been able to connect in person. For example, you and I, I'm not sure that we would be here if it wasn't for the internet connecting us. So I'm glad for that. And I've connected with people all over the world and all over the country, all over the state, wherever they may be. You're able to connect over the internet, which is a beautiful thing. And being able to have those discussions with people, being able to have, nice debates and things like that. But I do miss the in-person aspect of things. I think there's something that is really special about having that face-to-face interaction. And just as humans, we are social beings. We want to be around other people. We don't want to just be connected by a computer or by a phone. I think we all have that, innate feeling that we want to feel connected in person and not just over a screen. So I do miss the the humanity aspect of it and being able to, shake someone's hand, make real eye contact and not just looking at a screen. So I miss those kinds of things. But like I said, it has pros and cons.
Absolutely. And this kind of ties me a little bit into kind of the general legal profession here in regards to kind of practicing law in the midst of COVID. Obviously, you don't have as many of the in-person experiences. So how do you think the world of practicing law has changed during COVID? And do you think overall it's changed for the better, for the worse, or is it kind of a mix in between?
I would say it's a mix in between, but it's definitely made things easier virtually because, we can fit more clients in. We can just meet over Zoom. Clients don't have to drive to the office. Clients can just show up to court online. Court is on Zoom now. So that's very interesting, which can cause problems, but is also beneficial for clients who have, don't have transportation to get to the courthouse. They can just log on wherever, but it also causes issues for clients who may not have access to a computer or to a webcam or things like that. So makes things difficult in a sense, but I think it's also made things easier. I think it's always a mixture.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have either an Elle Woods filter or a cat filter? Because that obviously you could have been viral if you had you been in a courtroom with that.
Yeah,
You mentioned problems. I was thinking of the amazing viral video of that lawyer who had the kitty filter.
Yep.
I don't know if you saw that. Yeah,
I think that was actually in Broward County where I live.
Oh, wow.
I think so.
Oh gosh. I look, he's famous now, so, and I'm sure a lot of clients are now interested in his law firm, which I think is such an interesting model. But there you go.
Thing is bad publicity, right?
Right. Now I want to shift gears a bit to the legal commentary part of our conversation, and more specifically about your interest in legal commentary. Before we are recording, I mentioned how I was in my congressional office when I was an intern on the Hill, and I saw that on the TV that we had a number of legal commentators coming on TV. I just thought it was really interesting how something like this could attract a lot of attention, a lot of viewers. So I'm curious to know, what sort of things are you looking to prioritize as you build your career towards a field in legal commentary?
Sure. So, like I mentioned earlier, I always knew I wanted to go to law school. So, whenever I picked my major as journalism, I had the focus on I'm just here to get my degree and then go to law school. But what I didn't realize is that I would actually fall in love with the journalism profession. I fell in love with writing and being in front of the camera and really being that person to speak for those who are silenced and to hear people's stories and to share those stories with the world, with, a bigger audience than they wouldn't have without a journalist sharing that story for them. So I still knew I wanted to go to law school. So now that I'm through that, I want to practice for a few years and then maybe look for a job as a legal commentator on the side for a news network. I want to do that because I feel like the more we discuss the law, the more educated society will become. They say ignorance is no defense. So I just feel like as a lawyer that I have a civic duty to share my knowledge to help others. And I feel like being a legal commentator will really be able to fulfill that goal for me.
Yeah, that's really wonderful to hear. I want to ask you about how we get legal commentary to the general public, including those like myself who don't have a technical and academic background in law. How do we make legal commentary applicable but interesting for the general public?
Sure. So I think nowadays that's a benefit of social media is that there are many different outlets to make learning fun. For example, on Instagram, you have reels, stories, you can make posts, and you can bring humor into it. So I think if you make it entertaining, people are more likely to listen and retain that information than if you go about it in, a scholastic way through school or something like that. I think if you make it fun on social media and make a funny video or something like that that's also educational, I think your audience is much more likely to retain that information and remember it.
Exactly. Yes. Because I, again, as like I said, I'm not a law person, so I did apply to law school though. Fun fact: I don't think a lot of people know about that. I did apply to law school. Didn't get the result I wanted, but it's one of those things where you understand, the profile and understand the expectations of applying to law school. So I definitely can put that in my resume. I will say that the LSAT though. I don't know how you did it, Heather, but I was going through it again. And you mentioned the fun part. Can I just say one thing? There is this section, and for those who don't know about the LSAT, there's a section called the Logic Games, I guess. I think it's just called Games or
Logic game.
something.
Yes.
What? Right, exactly. Logic Games. The problem is, it was not the most fun games I've ever played before. So I kind of wish that they were a little bit more fun. Yes, that's right. So I hope that, and I know that you will do a lot of great things when it comes to making law more fun. And certainly, I mean, I mentioned the LSAT, and that's kind of a low bar in terms of fun. But I'm just saying that I very much look forward to something other than the logic game session. That was the section, I guess, in case people didn't realize, that was the section that I struggled the most with. I have to admit my vulnerabilities at some point, so you
Absolutely.
can't be perfect.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Very relatable.
I,
Accurate.
I should have contacted you.
Yeah, and
I should have contacted you, asked you for help, or ask say, hey, can Heather take the exam for me? Because
yeah.
you got always have the best and the brightest in there,
Aw.
to do that.
Yeah, any law student listening to this, they can certainly relate to you on the logic games. Those are definitely probably the least fun game I've ever played. I can say that for sure.
So true, so true. I want to now turn to this idea of women empowerment in law and journalism, which is an area which you're very passionate about, and you've really demonstrated how someone can truly live out this idea of being able to break certain barriers and inspire others to join the legal profession. Tell us about how your charity work and your community involvement has helped you with this platform of women empowerment in law and journalism and perhaps even politics too.
Absolutely. So, back to what I was saying earlier, my interest in law really stems from a genuine desire to help people and an aspiration to rectify social injustices and a love for intellectual stimulation through problem solving. And these passions of mine only became stronger throughout my pageant career. Like you mentioned, I'm competing for Miss Florida USA. And what many people don't realize is pageants involve a lot of community service. People think it's all about the glitz and glamour, but that's really only 1% of it. I would say truly 99% of it is really all about giving back to your community. And that is another reason why I wanted to go into law, is because I knew that would be a career that would allow me to give back to my community in an interesting way, in a way that I find valuable. So I do a lot of work with Tomorrow's Rainbow, which is an organization, a nonprofit in South Florida that helps children, teens, and families who are grieving the loss of a loved one. So my dad passed away back in December, and
Oh,
going through that, I was looking for a way to grieve. And I came across Tomorrow's Rainbow, and I was like, wow, this is a really great organization. So I went there to deal with my own grief. And I actually found that, this is an organization I want to become involved with. I want to help. So they asked me to become a program facilitator, which is sort of similar to a grief counselor. And we work with the children, their families, and it's interesting because it's also on a farm. So we have farm animals, miniature horses, they're the cutest things, and we have group every other Saturday. And it's a really interesting environment where we all just get together and talk about our grief, because that's something that is, I feel like it's stigmatized in today's society. We don't want to talk about grief. We don't want to talk about bereavement and our struggles that we've gone through, especially someone at a young age who has lost a parent. I feel like there is just not many outlets for me to explore my grief and my feelings. And a lot of my friends aren't able to understand because fortunately they still have both of their parents. So volunteering at Tomorrow's Rainbow has really been a great way for me to get involved with my community and give back. And one day I hope to be able to help with them on the legal side of things and get more involved with pro bono work with them and that sort of thing. But I just think it's really important to get involved with your community and give back in a way that is important to you, in a way that you're passionate about.
Sure. First of all, I'm so sorry to hear about your loss of your father.
Yeah.
That I recently came back home, and I thought about, we celebrated Father's Day and everything, and nowadays I really think about what my parents have given me over the last 23, almost 24 years of my life, my entire life. Obviously, I'm really glad though that you're finding a lot of this work and everything so valuable to giving back, right?
Absolutely.
And right, and knowing the value of a parent, I think is extreme, is one of the biggest blessings and you can ever have as a person, because you're I think the creator, but I also think obviously my parents, who would do anything to save my life or make sure that I have a very successful life. And I'm sure that you feel the same way too, and I just want to, I'm sure your father will be really, really proud of you, as certainly as you graduated from law school, which obviously has been a dream of yours for so long. And
Yeah.
I think you're definitely gonna do a lot of great things. I can tell you that, Heather,
Oh,
as we,
thank you.
right. I want to now kind of tie this back into the topic of women empowerment in law, especially in a field where it is predominantly male. And I'm, a true believer in equal opportunity. And this is all about growing those opportunities and growing the pie of opportunities here in America. What do you believe are the best ways to encourage and inspire more women to enter the legal profession nowadays?
Sure. So I think the statistics are really important. Women account for the majority of the US population. So why is it that women are represented by holding only about just over 25% of seats in Congress? I mean, that's a really crazy statistic to think about. And nowadays, women obtain almost half of all Juris Doctor degrees, but only 18% of those women are equity partners in law firms. So I think that it's my purpose as a woman in the legal field, to improve that statistic and change those numbers to better represent our society. And I want to inspire as many people as possible to work together to eliminate those barriers for women and minorities in the workforce. So hopefully just sharing my story on social media, sharing my story on the Miss Florida USA stage, and just putting it out there, women's empowerment. Just go out there, follow your dreams, and don't let those barriers stop you from doing what you want. I always say, I'm still interested in glass slippers, but I'm more interested in breaking the glass ceiling.
Ah, there you go. Wow, how do you come up with these amazing quotes? I don't know. Is there a book that you haven't shared with me yet? I can purchase on Amazon.
No, nothing, just spitballing here.
Oh, that's wonderful. Wonderful. I do have a tougher question for you, and something that clearly bothers me as a guy. I value respect, and I hope that there's more of that in this world. But have you and other female colleagues experienced some kind of unfair discrimination purely based on your gender? And if so, what has that been like in your journey to become the best version of yourself in this field?
Sure. So unfortunately, I think most of my female colleagues and equals have had this experience in the past at some point in their lives, unfortunately. I think that's just the truth of the matter. But especially being not only a woman, but a young woman in this field, it is very uncommon for people to take me as seriously as they should. I mean, I'm 24 years old and I have my Juris Doctor degree. And when I say that, some people don't even believe me. And I'm like, hello, they have these biases when they look at you, they judge the book by the cover. They're like, there's no way this girl is studying for the bar. There's no way that she can do Miss Florida and be a lawyer. People just put limitations on you. And I think that's unfair, but it's just the truth of the matter. So I have struggled with that, but you just can't let those things get to you, and you just have to prove those people wrong.
Do you think that if in an ideal world, would you at least advocate or require all law schools to watch Legally Blonde so that that you can maybe break down some of those stereotypes and also have a little entertainment, because I think it's a great movie too.
Absolutely. I think it's an unofficial requirement that you have to watch that movie before going to law school. Right. I feel like it's an unwritten rule.
I would have volunteered to watch the movie, write an essay about it instead of taking the LSAT. I can tell you that. Yeah. That would be the best legal commentary out there I can provide. That's my contribution to the legal world. I guess no state out there, no state bar association would recognize me for my wonderful legal accomplishments, but
Yeah, no, I think I always say, why do we have to define success and being beautiful as mutually exclusive? So I think Legally Blonde did a great job of breaking that stereotype. And I want to break that stereotype and let women know that, glass ceilings can be broken while wearing glass slippers too.
Fantastic. As we kind of approach the end of our episode, there's a couple more questions I'd like to ask you before we get into kind of the reflection phase, so to speak, of our conversation, which is really on, ways for, it could be legislative or policy and neither of those two, but just ideas on how we can expand opportunities for more women to enter the legal profession and public service. You mentioned your experiences and how people kind of judge you in a particular way. Are there any other initiatives or ideas that you have in mind to get more women to join these particular fields in their careers?
Sure. So one of my initiatives as a potential Miss Florida USA in the future is to really go into schools and speak to, the youth and the younger generation and see what their strengths are and what their aspirations are in life and help them get there. I think that young people, they really just need a mentor, someone to push them. And I'm so grateful that I had that person in my life to really push me to achieve my goals and to go to law school, because I'm not going to lie to you, there were many times where I was like, oh, this is too hard. I'm going to give up. I'm not going to do this anymore. But I had a great support system that kept pushing me along, and I wouldn't be where I am today without those mentors, without my family, without my mom and dad and those people pushing me throughout my life. So I want to be able to be a mentor for young girls or really anyone who looks up to me or needs a mentor. I want to be that person for them to help them find their strengths, help them find their aspirations, what their passions are in life. And I want to be able to help them get there in any way possible and be that person to motivate them, to inspire them, and help them along the way.
And what sort of message would you like to send to men in this case? I mean, we've been talking about women in law and public service, but what can men do to support their female colleagues in these particular professions as we move forward?
I would say just treat us as you would treat a male colleague. We don't want to be treated, especially just because we're a woman, we just want to be treated equally. It's all about equal justice and equality. We really just want to be viewed as equals. Don't treat us as any lesser just because we're women. We want to go out there and do the things that men are doing too, and we are fully capable of doing that. So just realizing that and treating us with equal respect, I would say, would be the main point that I would want to get across. It's just being respectful.
Right. And finally, before we get to our reflection part, what message would you like to send to women who are looking to join the legal profession, perhaps a journalism career, or a politics-related profession?
I encourage anyone who's listening to this, please reach out to me. I am an open book. And like I said, I want to be a mentor for those who are looking to follow the same career path that I did. So you can find me on Instagram, Facebook at Heather Lee O'Keefe. Go on my website, blondebarrister.com, and read more about me and see kind of the path that I took. And I'm more than happy to speak with anyone who is interested in a similar career path as me and offering my advice and my 2 cents on that. So please reach out to me. Don't be shy.
For sure. Absolutely. For those of you listening, make sure to check out Heather's website and Instagram. Again, those will be available down the show notes below. Heather, we're now in the reflection part of our phase, and I always start off with something a bit more fun and different from other shows. Since you're in the law profession, I'd like to ask if you can name one delegate from the Constitutional Convention, yes, the one in 1787, obviously, and one Supreme Court justice from the times of John Marshall to time of John Roberts, any time in American history. Those two individuals whom you have the most respect for and admire the most.
Absolutely. So I would have to say George Washington. I mean, how iconic! What a legend! He would have to be my favorite delegate from the Constitutional Convention. I think it's incredible that he was elected unanimously as the president of the Constitutional Convention, and his presence really provided a sense of focus and direction. I think it's also interesting. He originally didn't want to be involved with the creation of the Constitution, but he certainly had a vision for a stronger union. So he would have to be my favorite delegate. And then as far as my favorite Supreme Court justice, without a doubt, Sandra Day O'Connor, being the very first female associate justice of the Supreme Court. She was the first woman nominated and confirmed by President Ronald Reagan. And I just really look up to her. She was a huge icon for women in the legal profession. So she is hands down my favorite Supreme Court justice.
Great answers, especially the first one. I'm biased, obviously, when I say that. I loved your answer. I loved your answer for both, but especially about Washington, since he is kind of the in a way, kind of the namesake for this show. And this is a great tie-in with our next question, which is tying in the values of Washington's farewell address of 1796. I've listed there as patriotism, faith, national unity, education, fiscal responsibility, and civility. So, Heather, if you could pick one or more of these values that you think best ties in with our discussion and our conversation today, which one or which ones would that be and why?
I would say national unity and civility. George Washington warned against getting too involved with foreign countries and to stay neutral. So I think that's really important to not let your hatred for something cloud your judgment, and to really refrain from hatred and keep your political beliefs as unbiased as possible, and try to stay neutral and hear out other people's opinions, and just be compassionate and aware that there are more than one political ideologies out there.
If you were to meet someone who had a different outlook on life, who's someone who could really disagree with you on a number of issues, how would you promote civility when you first meet that person?
So I think it just all comes down to respect. I mean, no matter if you're the juiciest peach in the world, there's still going to be someone who doesn't like peaches. And you just have to be aware of that and respectful of other people's opinions. It's, okay, of course, to share your opinions with others and to have that conversation. But when it comes to a point of being disrespectful, becoming hateful towards others, and just shutting down and putting your guard up, I think that's when it comes to a point of, you hit a wall and you hit a plateau there. So I think there's a fine line between sharing your opinions and having that conversation and, keeping it respectful.
Exactly. Boy, it seems like a lot of the things that we're talking about today, all roads lead to Legally Blonde for some reason, because that's exactly what Elwood's had to go through in regards to people not treating her with respect. And what's funny about that video, what's interesting about that movie is that the people who were calling for diversity, I think included in the diversity committee, they themselves are not very diverse in terms of their background anyway. So it was it's also kind of funny. It was just like, for those of you who haven't watched it, you guys better watch it. I don't know if it's on Netflix or
I think it is.
Amazon Video. Or oh, it is. It is. All right. Well, some people have some homework to do, clearly. Well, Heather, as we kind of approach the end of our time, first of all, I want to thank you so much for coming on to Friends and Fellow Citizens. You've offered a lot of amazing experiences and words of wisdom, I think, for our audience, and obviously all the things that you've done already. I mean, like I mentioned before, it would take an entire episode to cover every single thing that you've done,
Aww.
and to be able to highlight some of those and to tie those into some of the larger issues of civility, of national unity, and to tie in also with the other subject, 3 subjects that we mentioned earlier: law, journalism, and political science. I really see that as a valuable conglomerate that could really open up people's minds, for a lot of things. And I think it's good to have a combination. It doesn't have to be a collision of 3 worlds. It's really like a melting pot almost. And I just want to give you one opportunity to make any closing remarks you'd like to add to our audience and to conclude our show.
Sure. So I, of course, just want to thank you for having me. I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation today, and I really appreciate you having me on the show. So thank you so much.
And that'll wrap up our episode for this week. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. At the time of this recording, I wish Heather all the best at the Miss Florida USA competition coming up later this week. At the time of the release of this episode, I know that Heather's done an amazing job representing Broward County at the competition. Enjoy the rest of your day, and remember, a day in America always gets better when we're with our friends and fellow citizens.